What I'm going to do is give you a small introduction to Schelling's Clara. In my opinion, one of the most beautiful texts of German idealism. Clara is about a woman. This might be Clara, a woman like she is. She is mourning the death of her husband, and I will give 9, perhaps 10 quotations. But I will do that, of course, from the point of view of Cherish and Destroy. So what can Schelling's Clara, how can this little book help us to understand Cherish and Destroy? Well, Schelling loved his wife Caroline. Soon after her death, 1809, Schelling wrote Clara as a way of mourning. He worked a couple of years on the text. It's a trialogue. Taking the floor are Clara. She is the bearer of intellectual intuition, of intellektuelle Anschauung. So for her, there are moments in her mind that everything is one. All is one, and all is in coherence. Everything presents itself as one. That's very important. That's not always possible, but there are moments that it's possible. Perhaps that's actually the basic idea of the book. After death, there will we'll have a new life, and this life will be of a much more spiritual character, and then we will experience this oneness much deeper than we do now. So she is the bearer of intellectual intuition and a representative of the soul. And that is Clara. Then there is the reverend as a representative of God and the mind, and there is the physician as a representative of nature and the body. Now, philosophy is the merging of these 3 poles. Every philosopher is a combination of a psychologist, a theologian, and a doctor. The reverend and the medicine explain to Clara the nature and functioning of her intellectual intuition, hoping that she will gain a better understanding of herself and expecting her to return to normal life. She is really embedded in this state of mind, of mourning, and of this very pleasant experience of oneness. Well, everything happens on the 1st of November or the 2nd of November, the Day of All Souls, the day to commemorate the dead. And Clara is mourning the death of her husband, Albert. Well, this book wasn't published during his lifetime, Schelling. It is published after he died, but it is generally considered to be the best introduction to his work. Now, note that in this trialogue, the most important position is for the woman. She plays a major role, Clara, an exception in the history of philosophy. And Schelling is the only philosopher in whose philosophy a woman plays the most important part. And please, when listening to the quotations, keep in mind our theme, cherish and destroy. Now, I simply will read some fragments out of the English translation made by Fiona Steinkamp and published by SUNY, State University of New York Press. Okay, let's see how it works. We are in a convent, in a cloister, and Clara is standing at a window. The direction of her eyes drew me toward the open window, and as she caught sight of the blue and remote hills, her eyes filled with tears, and she said, "Behind those hills yonder, which will become bluer and over which the sun is now about to sink, there lies buried everything I have. So the point of it's said about Clara by the reverend, and she has this gaze into infinite space in which she can think about her husband who died. So it's literally a gaze into the blue. Let's see what happens now. Yeah, she's staring. This is exactly what is what her friends are trying to end, to stop. She should return to normal life. She remains too much in this state of mind. But she has a specific reason to do so. It has become so clear to me again how the life that we now live is completely one-sided. It's a complete one-sided one, and that it will become complete only if what is more highly spiritual could combine with it, and if those whom we call diseased were not to stop living with us, but were simply to make up, as it were, another part of the whole family. So life can't be complete without the dead, and she imagines a world in which the living and the dead together uh, are there. And there is then a new community of living and dead people. We should support all festivals and customs in which we are reminded of a connection with the world beyond, which is exactly what happens at All Souls on the 2nd of November. More a Catholic feast, but Clara, as Schelling, is a Protestant, but that is what the Catholics do better. They are at the graves to commemorate the dead. Well, that has a specific idea of spirituality, of focusing on another world than the world we live in. And Clara is the advocate of this other world. But you yourself grant, Clara said, that at least in us something else lives, something that is other than a mere material essence, the spirit. You will therefore also have to admit that through this letter we really do have a link to that world, and that even if we accept that the material is cut off from the spiritual, there is no proof against a possible connection between what is spiritual in us and the powers of another world. That is really what she wants to say, and she wants us to convince about that point of view, that there is not only matter, but also spirit, and that in another life the spiritual will be more important than the material, as is the case now. And then they are making a walk in the fresh air, and she insisted on taking a path that she usually doesn't take. And then there's a conversation which is quite important. I feel better here in the little old vale. Autumn cannot take too much away from it. It keeps the warmth of the sun better and could even make us believe that times were still good. Here the fragrant time is still pushing through and intensifies our memory. Now that's the idea that spirit has its origin in matter, and that is something you literally can smell. In the meadow, lilies have already been swaying for some time, their light blue, suggesting the pale color of remembrance where everything finally disappears. It is supposed to be a poisonous plant, that is, where everything finishes, and whatever nature had at the beginning must indeed be revealed at the end. Nature too seems to have a secret consuming poison within herself. But why does she share it with her children so that even they become consumed by it? Nature is very much a place of destruction. There is much destruction in nature, there's much destruction in matter. And there's also, coming out of this matter, another spiritual life. And that is what happens in the next idea. I find your complete unjust is then what the doctor says. Even in your own opinion, nature is suffering from a hidden poison that she would like to overcome or reject, but cannot. Doesn't she mourn with us? So also, nature is mourning with us, also striving for freedom, yes, just as we are. And we are able to complain, but she, nature, suffers in silence and can talk to us only through signs and gestures. What a quiet sorrow lies in so many flowers, the morning dew and in the evening's fading colors. In only few of her appearances does nature emerge as terrible, and then always only temporarily. Soon everything retreats into its usual confines, and in her normal life, nature appears always as a subjugated strength that moves us through the beauty that it brings forth when in this condition. And then there is this idea about the flowers. It's true, she replied, for example, I don't know why for me some flowers hold so sweet a sorrow in their fragrance. And I always have to conclude that the flower must itself have that same sorrow for it to smell like that. That's all Clara. I imagine it's not true, but somehow this painting by Caspar David Friedrichs gives me the impression of this could be Clara. The other illustrations are by Marcel Westorp and were especially selected as illustration by my Dutch translation of Schelling's Clara. Especially this one I love very much. You can't see it as clear as I hope you could see it, but it gives you an impression. This one is very clear, so I'll keep it this way. And then the doctor continues with the title of my contribution, Earth is One Great Ruin. The whole earth is one great ruin, where animals live as ghosts and men as spirits, and where many hidden powers and treasures are locked away as if by an invisible strength or by a magician's spell. And we wanted to blame these powers that are locked up rather than thinking about freeing them within us first. Certainly, in his own way, man is no less spellbound and transformed. Because of this, heaven sent higher beings from time to time, who were supposed to undo the spell within his inner being and to open up to him a glance into the higher world again with their wonderful hymns and magic charms. Most people, however, are completely captivated by external appearances and think that it is therein that it's to be found, just as farmers creep round an old, destroyed or enchanted castle with divining rods in their hands or shine their lamps into chambers buried underground and even go with crowbars and levers in the hope of finding gold or other valuables. So too does man go about nature, entering some of her hidden rooms and calling his search natural science. But the treasures are not covered by rubble alone. The treasures have been locked up in the very wreckage and rocks themselves by a spell that only another magic charm can undo. So this whole exploitation of nature by man, this whole idea of colonizing, of subjugating nature in technology, finds here a firm protest and is countered by the idea of the search of a spiritual life. There aren't always arguments, and that's very interesting in what Clara says. In moments like this, she continued, my conviction needs no reason. I see everything as if it were present. To me, it feels as if the spirit life were already embracing even me, as if I were still strolling on earth, but as a completely different kind of being, as one born by a soft, gentle element, as if it were without need and without pain. Why can't we hold onto these moments? So she is now singing a hymn to her intellectual intuition, to her feeling of being one. And perhaps the doctor said in reply, this level of profundity isn't compatible with the limitations of our present life, whose destiny appears to be such that everything will be explained and recognized only bit by bit. And isn't it so, I added, that when you, I, the doctor, that when you are in such a state, it seems as if your whole being were unified in one focal point, as if it were one light, one flame. So that's this idea of experiencing the oneness of the world, the oneness of all being, already now. And that means that death is the release of the inner form of life from the external one that keeps it suppressed. So there's very much hope about the afterlife, about life after death. All corporeal things exhibit a drive to become more spiritual. What else is the fragrance of a flower, and how spiritual must those discharges be from those redolent bodies, fragrant bodies that survive for years without decaying. So this is matter itself transforming itself to spirit. All organic beings and no others provide us with an instinct of death. Well, I could quote some more, but I won't do it simply because of time. I will give a little summary, and then I'll give some remarks about how this book is considered, what philosophers now think about it, especially our own Susanna Lindberg has said some beautiful things about this book, and I will quote them. Schelling's Clara is a profound meditation about death. That's my summary. Yeah? That's another form of life. Our body and mind will gain a higher spiritual order. The soul will continue to be the tie between body and mind. Our personality will remain the same. Our life will stop to be one-sided and become complete. Our community will be not only of those of the living, but also include the dead. In our daily life, there is already a link to the world of the dead in our longing for immortality. The afterlife will suit better our inner needs, and we will belong to the whole of all unity. Clairvoyance, dream, sleepwalking, and specters, ghosts, as images of the disease, give us a hint.
Dying is a process of nature. Nature is the beingness of God. God is being in nature, its active element. This doctrine is not pantheism, but panentheism. Spiritualization is a process of nature itself, like the fragrance of a flower or the dissolution of metals in fluid. Everything is transient and nature is a ruin. Therefore, man should take his responsibility and act as the savior of nature. He can do this by purification in this world and by continuing purification in the afterlife, according to his freedom. Clara's intellectual intuition, as if your whole being were unified in one focal point, as if it were one light, one flame, makes her experience death already in life, but she isn't able to hold this experience for a longer time, only by moments. As for Plato, the universe is a work of art. Music transports us into the realm of the ideas and the departed. German Geister means both ideas and the ghost of the departed. Clara is about the Geisterreich. For Clara, the spiritual is not enough. She demands a physical, visible form. Is death a work of art, and are there artists willing to make it? Is Schelling thought able to be a source of inspiration for us now in general, and more specific for contemporary artists, like for Marcel Festo? Now, to finish, I will tell you something about people who are very much against this book. There's a philosopher called Alexander Grau, and he doesn't agree with Schelling. Schelling doesn't give us arguments. He isn't convincing. Schelling considers freedom and necessity as being the same. Longing for origin and unity is but a feeling. His appeal for abstinence, for the pure spirit against the sinful body, that's all horrific and out of date. The only attraction of Clara is her idea of communication, purely based on intuition in the afterlife. Her vision of a new community with better understanding might be a source of inspiration. Now, for Susanna Lindberg, she is really an advocate of Schelling's Clara. Where is she, by the way? Okay, there you are. Well, you wrote some papers about Schelling's Clara, which I consider very, very important. Especially this coming community makes Clara interesting, referring to Blanchot, Derrida, Nancy, and Agamben. This idea of a coming community is haunting her, but only dead people can know. As a reflection about the immortality of the soul, Clara is out of date. But in our idea of art, representing the ultimate philosophical truth, very contemporary. Schelling gives us a building site in ruins of the poem to come, le chantier en ruine du poème à venir. Moreover, there is in Schelling an upgrade of earth, matter, and nature. The soul is linked to nature. Only in as much as you can see yourself, the soul is linked to nature. Only in as much as you can see yourself as part of nature, you are able to spiritualize yourself in death. Only the community of the departed is really free and alive, not ours. This community is outside time as we know it. Clara is at the same time humble and megalomaniac. She doesn't think the absolute is thinking in her. I don't know how much time I do have. 5 minutes. Okay, then another quotation of Susanna Lindberg, another reference to Susanna Lindberg, and then I want to say something about Marcel Wester. According to Susanna Lindberg, Schelling is somehow a precursor of Blanchot. Both are interested in a coming community outside existing institutions. Both are interested in death as the focus point of art. Both consider the night as elemental, primordial, and immemorial experience that cannot be solved in thought or conceptualization. The night will always remain as unavoidable matter as the primordial chaos that can be surmounted but will never disappear. And this is very beautiful, and I want to show the other picture of Marcel Westop, who's also with us. Where's Marcel? There you are. Okay. Especially when I look at this picture, I think about what is said here. The night will always remain as unavoidable matter as the primordial chaos that can be surmounted but will never disappear. It is the Urgrund, Ungrund, the foundation and the abyss. The main difference between both is that for Schelling, the loss of self means the entrance into the absolute, whereas for Blanchot, there is no absolute, only the anonymity of daily life and its murmur that never stops. I think I will, that's it. I think I will stop here. Thank you very much for your patience.